Alright, we're going to show you how to install that lower trim light on the bumper cover. You see the left side's working right now with the turn signal on. We're going to go ahead and do the right side, which has not been started yet. One thing to note, if you don't have a power probe, it makes this job a little bit harder, but I suggest if you do any kind of 12 volt work, power probe is key. It'll save you a lot of time. This is what it looks like here. This is the newest model, I believe, and this guy can give you 12 volts. It's got a ground hook up here if you need to test lighting. What I did on the left side is I tested the wiring coming out of the light to make sure all the functions worked before I installed it. I tested it again after I installed it, and we're going to do the same thing on the right side. Actually, I know that one works, but next we're going to go ahead and pull that right tail light out and check the wiring colors because they are different from side to side. One thing to note though, I did see on Amazon where I bought these that someone said they didn't need to take their bumper cover off to install them, and they showed a picture of their car. The car they had on there was a single exhaust on the right side. It does not have any chrome trim or anything like that, and that is true. If you have that bumper cover, you do not need to remove the bumper cover to install these lights. The old lenses will pop out, and these ones will pop in. You're good to go. However, if you have a car like mine that's actually a pretty sweet ride, you're going to have dual exhaust with chrome trim rings. These lights are directly above a very sharp metal housing behind that trim ring that you're going to just cut yourself up. You can't see, so you got to remove the bumper cover to get to it. Luckily, my body shop go ahead and threw them in for me because some idiot hit me on the right rear corner a couple weeks ago, and they did an amazing job making it look like it never happened. So onto the taillight. Okay, on this taillight, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on, the parking lamps and the blinker. And that's just getting ready. We're going to pop these two nuts off here. That's going to allow us to pop the taillight out. The whole taillight goes in that direction. Okay? Does not pull back. Everything kind of goes that way. So I'm filming this by hand. I don't have a tripod today, so bear with me here. I don't think it's going to work. I'm going to have to go ahead and pause and take these out. Okay, so we took the nuts off. They're 10 millimeter. Now we're going to go ahead and just try to finagle this puppy out. Actually, let me pull it back a little bit. I don't know if one hand it's going to actually work very well, so there we go. And this guy here has that little guy right there. That will break off in that plastic if you're not careful, so be gentle. So now we're going to go ahead and disconnect that connector there. It is, I believe, 5 or 6 wires. Let's see, it looks like it's a 6-pin connector with 5 wires, 4 of which we need. And just pop this off. Oh, there it is. There we go. Oh, here, let me pause this. Alright, now you got your connector here. Actually, I like to look at it this way. Your ground is going to be the black white wire, or on the other side it was black purple. It's always in that bottom corner, so it's pretty easy to figure out which one that is. And then for the rest of the wiring, we're going to go ahead and just check with the power probe what these are. I'll go ahead and set the camera up so you can watch how I do that. My guy ran the wiring right up behind the bumper cover. We don't need this much. It comes way up, so we don't need all that. We're going to trim it back to keep it about the same length as this harness, because what we're going to end up doing is cutting the harness wiring about a couple inches back from the plug and stripping back everything, twisting, soldering, heat shrinking, and move on to the next wire. We're going to do that four times, and we'll get that going. Now, one thing to note, if you buy these on Amazon, the wiring picture on the Amazon link, the page, shows that the white wire, they listed as a blue wire. It's not, it's a white wire. So you got black, green, red, and white, and they all work as they are listed on Amazon. Just remember that that white wire is actually what they list as a blue wire. that kind of gives us the angle we're looking for. Alright, so what I use for soldering, I love it. I've been using different soldering irons my whole life. I don't know, probably the past 30 years or more. This little guy is something I got off of Amazon at some point. You can buy them there. This one's the TS100 model. This soldering iron is just cat's ass. It'll run 12 to 24 volts. I run it right off this special little guy I bought here. It connects to my DeWalt battery. Well, this is a Mac Tools battery, but they are DeWalt. Plugs right in. Plugs in the side here. It's got a couple of USBs if you want to charge something. And then you're powered up, and you can fire it up, and it'll get 400 degrees Celsius without problem. You're going to want one of these, something to keep your soldering iron clean in between, pretty much before every solder joint you make. A clean iron is a happy iron, and you're gonna have very clean solder joints, and that makes a huge difference down the road if you're ever having an issue when you're trying to troubleshoot something. So we're gonna go ahead and pull the tape off. Sooner or later. It off just enough to get back to it. So what I'll do is just trim off what I don't need, toss it, make sure that's still sticky down there, and then we're going to tape it all back up, and we're actually going to run the wiring, as much of this wiring inside this wire loom as possible. And this is a small wire loom, it's not very large, but it'll hold it all. It did on the other side, no problem. So give this a little slack. So we're probably going to cut this, so probably, what is that, maybe 10 inches from where it's exiting the vehicle. 8 to 10 inches. Okay, now I have a wiring diagram here for this car. It wasn't correct on the driver's side for whatever reason. Couple of these wire colors, they look like they were backwards the way they're listed here. This is from ProDemand, which is a subscription service for mainly automotive repair shops. It's not the cheapest thing in the world, but if somebody's working on this and they need a copy of it, I can PDF and just email it to you. Just leave a note or a message down below, and I'll get it back to you as soon as I can. Again, I can look it up for your year, make, and model. They are different. This is for a 17 Fusion Titanium. And again, these wiring, some of these descriptions here are not correct for the wire color that you actually find. So I thought that was kind of odd. That does happen sometimes. That's why I like to test with the power probe. That way you know exactly what you're working with. So we're going to go ahead and grab the power probe, and we're going to start checking to see what's what. And I made a little diagram of the other side, looking at the plug, if you can see that, and I just wrote down what wiring to connect to which wire from behind that plug. That's the face of the plug. If you're looking at it with a small plastic piece at the top and the two smaller ones at the bottom. And let's see, green is turned, so that means that should be on right now. That would be this one here. It sounds like a turn signal to me, so that is correct. White on the new light. The white wire is going to connect to park lamps, so that should be a constant 12 volt, and it should be in the center. There we go, so we know that's good. The red is the brake, and that should be nothing right now. It's kind of weird. Oh, you know what? Maybe because the turn signal's on, it's causing that to happen. And then ground should be the bottom right. And that is showing me a ground. That's another great thing about this power probe. You can test for grounds and positive 12 volt sources wherever. There's a shit ton of modes in this thing that you can check resistance levels of wiring while it's live, which I don't know of any other tool you can use to do that. Usually the circuit has to be completely dead to check resistance. This thing's, I love it. It's amazing. It's absolutely, it's worth its weight in gold. It's paid itself off in time that I've saved working on vehicles over the years, probably 5 times over by now. And they're not super expensive. I don't remember exactly what this was, but I want to see it was less than $200. So looks like our wiring schematic for the left side is going to be the same on the right side. The wiring colors really don't matter because we just tested it. We know what's what, and we made a diagram for ourselves. So our next step is to start stripping back and getting wiring ready to go with heat shrink at the right size and making this happen. I like to strip these black outer housings on whatever I'm working with a razor blade very carefully. I'll just give the wire a spin, hold the razor blade still, and just slightly give it that so when I bend it back it splits open. If you push too hard, you're going to go right into the insulation on each wire that's facing the razor blade side. You don't want to do that because then you're kind of screwed. You're going to have short circuit or corrosion issues down the road. So if you're real careful and gentle, you can make this work for you. It does take some practice. So ground, we're going to start with that. Get that done out of the way. That way, as I'm working, I know what's functional. I can test real quick because the ground's already connected. I'm going to go shut the car off so I can start doing this. Don't do this with it running. It's a good way to blow a fuse if you leave the car on or the lights on. Ideally, you would disconnect the battery, but you really don't need to for this situation. As long as the car's off and the lights aren't turned on, you'll be fine. Okay, so ground on this side is a black white wire, and we're going to pull this back, probably 2.5 inches behind the harness. And snippers, I'm going to go ahead and give that a good snip. I kind of cut it in the middle. I got about 5 inches of wire here between where it comes out of the loom to the plastic connector. So I like to cut it about in the middle so I have enough to work with and enough room to slide some heat shrink on either side of the wire, whatever works for me. Sometimes you don't have enough room and you gotta make do, but alright, so this heat shrink's a little longer than I like. I usually trim a little off. I want it to overlap by about 1/4 inch past the solder joints, the exposed wire. This is a heat shrink that has a self-sealing. When it heats up, it'll shrink, and this goo kind of comes out and seals the whole entrance of the wire into the heat shrink on both sides, so you don't have to worry about moisture intrusion down the road, which is a big thing to be concerned about, especially in this kind of setup where these harnesses and these plugs are exposed to moisture, weather, rain, car wash, whatever. They are not connected inside the body. They are on the right behind the tail lamp. So I'm going to go ahead and strip this back about 3/4 of an inch, because I'll show you the way I'm going to connect these wires to each other. It's going to be nice, neat, and it's not going to look like a 6-year-old did it or an 8-year-old. That's how I used to do it when I was about 8. So make sure I give myself enough here. Be real careful. The wiring they give you on that on these lights is very, very thin. I don't even know if it's made out of copper. It doesn't like to bend or twist very easily. It's a real pain in the ass. So you're going to want to make sure you get a nice, good twist. I like to start with probably a 30-degree angle with the two wires that you're going to twist together here. It's at about a 30-degree angle of each other, so when they twist, they actually overlap consistently. Give it a good 6 or 7 turns. Make sure it's nice and tight. They don't pull it back next to itself. And then what I do is I take the two wires here, and I don't put them together like this and twist them. I put them together like this and twist them. So it's about another 30-degree, but you're going to be actually twisting both ends of each wire over each other. It takes a little practice to get this right, and you don't want any tension on the wire pulling away from your twist, from your joint here, because it will pull itself away. So once you get it nice and twisted like that, it's a nice clean joint. And you know what I just did? I do what I always do, and I do it to myself consistently. I forgot to put the heat shrink on. So pull it apart, do it again. Make sure this cleans up. And we're going to get our heat shrink in place. It's actually my first real instructional YouTube video, so we'll see how it goes. There. That's probably the best joint you're going to get doing this without any kind of butt connectors, which I just don't like butt connectors. They tend to corrode. If you crimp them, the crimping usually busts through the plastic of the butt connectors, so you end up with a tiny little pinhole from the crimping tool that you may not even know is there, and the next thing you know, you're getting corrosion and your circuit's not working and you don't know why, and that's what you end up finding out. So I like to do a hard joint like this with solder. So we're going to go ahead and heat up this soldering iron, and it heats up pretty quick. I keep it at about 340 is what I like to run at, 340C. No, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. That's okay. I use metric surprisingly more than I ever thought I would, especially living in the United States. I do a lot of projects with 3D printing and laser stuff, resin printing, and all my measurings in metric. So I've gotten quite used to it. Temperature I'm still a little thrown on sometimes, but so now we're gonna go ahead and heat that up, get that shrunk. And I'm not using a heat gun today, although I probably should be. If you use a torch, be very careful. I always put a rag down to protect against solder, heat from the torch, things of that nature. Keep it back from your work area. Actually, you know what, guys? I completely forgot I'm talking here, and I forgot to use the soldering iron. So don't do that. Make sure you solder your joint before you heat shrink it. This is going to be a how not to video. So, trick with soldering is get a little solder on your tip. If it needs to, go ahead and just tin it, which means solder it, the tip of the soldering iron, and then run it through your wire mesh solder cleaner. That'll keep the tip nice and clean. I like to give it a little dab once it's clean, and then touch the wire and melt I basically start the solder on the tip that's touching the wire right at that point where the two are touching, and then I move the solder down onto the wire to transfer the heat, help flow the heat a little faster, and then I just keep the tip of the soldering iron on the wire and the solder on the wire on the back side, and try to get the whole thing coated as best I can without using too much. Then I like to move the soldering iron to the bottom side just to help pull the solder through and let it wick through, so you get a nice joint. It's all imbued into the wiring. I don't know what the word is. So that's a good joint. We're gonna go ahead and seal that up real quick. Again, be careful with your torch. Don't put it right on it. You want the heat, not the flame. And if you use a rag. You're not going to probably want to use for anything real good, because you are going to, especially this microfiber, you are going to kind of melt it a little bit. I'm keeping the tip of the flame that you can just visibly barely see about an inch back, inch and a half back from my wiring here, and it's still a little hot, so I think we're about good there. This torch is the Torch 300 by Snap-on. I don't know if they even sell that anymore. I've had it for a number of years. It's a butane torch. Works great. It just takes a while to shut off. I've got about 3 or 4 different torches that I've gotten over the years from Snap-on and Mac. You can use any one that you want. They all pretty much do the same job. So we got our ground. We're going to move on to the next, which is going to be the upper right on our face here. This was the bottom right that we just did right there. We're going to go to the upper right. And on this one, it looks like it's a purple-white wire. So we're going to go ahead and snip that. Strip it, and this is where our red wire is going to go for the brake stop lamp. I do have an automatic wire stripper. When I'm using really tiny fine wires, I don't like to use it for that. It does put a decent amount of pressure down, and sometimes will cut through the sheathing and the wire itself, and that's a problem, especially if you don't have a lot to begin with that you're working with. You end up really kind of screwing yourself. So I like to use just a manual wire stripper and not the cheap one you'll find at like Lowe's or anything. This is a Smack Tools, I think. I got this. Not sure what model it is here. Now you can see what it looks like. So if you find one like this, these things are great. It's got 2 places to cut wire, stripper, crimper at the end, although I don't use those for crimping. My favorite crimping tool is this guy. This is a Snap-on 29ACF, I believe is the part number for this. This thing is gives you a hell of a lot of torque when you're at the very end of it. But we're not using any crimping today, so we're going to go ahead and not forget our heat shrink this time. But you can't get it on after your wires are connected, although that'd be a cool invention. And then we're going to go ahead and get these twisted together, end over end. It's a little bit longer than I wanted, but that's okay. I have more than enough heat shrink to cover it, so not a problem. This soldering iron will go to sleep, and it'll drop its temperature down to about 150 C while it's sleeping. It's to save battery energy, to keep it from getting too hot, burning something that it might be, it might fall or you may not notice, whatever. Here, let's get some lighting over here. A little bit better. Okay. We're up to 280 C already from 150, so it's pretty quick. You can start soldering right now. It's hot enough. Pull the solder through. Make sure there's no gobs. Keep it clean. A little goes a long way if you do it right. And now we can pull the heat shrink back. Sometimes you got to be careful, the wire's too hot. If you stop with the heat shrink before you get it in place, it could be hot enough in there to stick it to the wire where you don't want it, and then you're like, oh well, now what do I do? All right, torch. On to the next one. We're probably going to do the blue-white wire, which is right in the middle of this top middle. That's going to connect to our white wire from the light, which again, this is the wire that Amazon listing shows as blue, and it's not, it's white. So we'll go ahead and trim that back. We're going to snip this. If you got enough wire, sometimes it's good policy to make your when you're doing multiple wires next to each other like this, to move your cuts down a little bit or up a little bit to keep them distance from each other. That way when you wrap it all up inside the wire loom, there's not one big bulge in one particular spot. I guess there's kind of enough wire here to do that, but I'm not too worried about it. These wires are so thin that it doesn't really make a huge deal. Okay, so we got our white, so we go with the blue. Again on about a 30-degree angle, because this wire is shit. It's like angel hair, it's so thin. Good old Chinese wire. So moving on to the heat shrink again. Give us the right length. I don't like using too much, definitely not too little. And in this situation, because of how thin and frail this wiring is coming off the light, I like to put the heat shrink on the side that doesn't have that, where I'm not pushing them together, so I'm not creating any issue where something's going to fray before I get to solder it together. So just twist it around each other. Again, if you have spare wire kicking around, take a couple pieces and practice getting that together like that. You're just end over end of each other. Probably took me, I don't know, 5 or 6 times to get it to how I wanted it originally back in the day when I first started doing them like this, instead of putting 2 together and then twisting them, because then you got that little tail stick in there and it's like, all right, well, that just looks like shit. You know, functionality is one thing, but making it look like it was done professionally is definitely important too in my book, especially if you have customers that are paying you to do this kind of work and they, for whatever reason, take it to another shop someday for some work, you know, on maybe something similar next to it or the same wiring or whatever the case may be. This thing's still waking up here. You know, it reflects on you. They're gonna at some point maybe see that, and if it looks professional, they're gonna come back to you and be like, you know what, you did a great job. You are a professional, and it shows in your work. Looks like plenty. Go ahead, pull our heat shrink back, and give our torch a good run here. Prefer the heat gun over the torch, just so you don't burn things, but I don't have an outlet next to me right now, so like I just blackened that wire a little bit. That's okay. Nothing got hurt. You see shit light up in flames, and then you got an issue. Alright, the last wire is the green, and we're gonna go ahead and connect that. That's gonna go on the top left connector here. Again, I'm measuring, I'm saying top left with this wide piece at the top where the clip goes, and then these 2 little plastic guides on the bottom. One thing you could do, if you had enough room and enough wiring, is you could run a really large piece of heat shrink, maybe something like this, around all the wiring. So when you're done doing your smaller stuff, you could just run that bigger piece up, keep it all together. I've got this wire loom, so I'm not going to do that. Obviously, it's not really necessary in this situation, but a lot of times that is nice to do. It does, again, make things look nice and neat, keeps things together so nothing pulls apart. It does create a problem if you're trying to figure out if you got a bad solder joint at some time down the road, or you go to test all this and something's not right, and now you're like, well, shit. But it does look nice. Damn it, I did it again. Forgot the heat shrink. This angel hair freaking wire is just shit. Absolute shit. Does not want to twist, does not want to hold its shape like copper does. It's got to be made out of something else. Okay. Go ahead and run these together. I must have left the lights on or something. I think I did, actually. I could have sworn I turned them off. Okay, so we're going to solder our last wire. Should be good to go. And we'll test and see, make sure everything's good before we button it back up. When I test, I like to plug the taillight back in to test. Just to make sure there's no short circuiting issues, nothing like that. Then everything works fine. That in the car, does most likely, most cars nowadays are going to see that there's a resistance issue because the taillight's not plugged in. So you might get a code thrown or a light on the dash telling you, hey, you got a bulb out, whatever. These, I don't know, I've never tried, but these lights, everything on this car is LED from the factory except for the plate light lamps. Everything else is LED, headlights, tail, everything. So resistance isn't as much of an issue if it was like an incandescent bulb. Those you can definitely tell. The car can definitely tell. That's why your blinker will blink fast on older cars if you get a bulb out, because there's less resistance for the blinker circuit, and it starts blinking faster. Did I solder that already? Oh, I did. Alright, so we're done with the soldering iron. We're going to go ahead and shut that off. And then if you do buy one of these soldering irons, or you do have one, if you don't disconnect it from your battery, even though the soldering iron's off and unplugged here, this little adapter will drain your DeWalt battery. So, disconnect that. Learned that the hard way. A little bit of a wind blowing in here from outside, so it's moving my flame around more than I am. Ooh, see? Alright, that's good enough. As long as you see it goo a little bit on each side, you're nice and sealed. That's how you know. Probably should have trimmed the wiring back a little bit more than I did. I got a little excess here that I don't like, but I'm just gonna fold it up on itself and tape it. Just a small piece of electrical tape, and then we're gonna put it back inside this wire loom and tape that back up. Actually, move this out of the way now. Okay, there we go. Now, since it looks like I left my lights on, you can see that light's already on parking. So I must have left the parking lamp switch on even though the car's off. It is what it is. We're going to go ahead and put the tail light in. Plug it in and kind of set it in place for now. So I know the tail light works. I'm gonna get it back in its spot. Be gentle putting this back in. Get all your holes lined up. Once you get everything lined up and you know it's in place, you can get a little tap, little love tap. And then we're going to, by hand, put the 10 mils back on the inside so it doesn't fall back out. Try not to drop them down into the car like I just did. Hoping to catch it before it falls any further. There we go. Snugged up enough. Okay, so we're lit up. I'm gonna pull the workbench back. This is my workbench, guys. I just bought a Homac Tools one from Napa. Built my own box on top. It's got rechargeable 12-volt batteries that I built out of battery packs I ordered in bulk. They're all lithium-ion or lithium polymer battery packs. Picked up some cheap speakers and a stereo for it. Flashlight charger, switches, got lights underneath. It'll run probably about 6 or 8 hours on a full charge, and right now it's 3 out of 4. And then you got your USB if you want to use that. You got a switch for it here. The hell does that do? That one might, no, this one light, this one turns on the stereo. Yeah, but we're not using any of that right now. So okay, we're gonna go ahead and set the camera down and give this a quick test. Turn signal, that's the turn signal there. Brake. So it should be working. Yep, well, it looks like we're doing pretty good. So that's pretty much it, guys. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll be sure to answer them for you. Thanks.